Hey guys, as always, Elliot here. Welcome to my channel. How are you doing, guys? Let me know below in the comment section. I hope you've been enjoying your week. If you like true crime content, you've come to the right place. Welcome. Well, let's not waste our time and dive into today's case. This is definitely a different one from the others I covered in the previous episodes, because it's been solved, despite 35 long years. It's about a teenager, an 18-year-old girl, whose life has sadly come to a tragic end on a cold winter night in the mid-1980s, and she had apparently been forgotten for many decades. There were no leads to follow back in the days, but thanks to advances in technology, justice was served. Maybe not completely served, many will say. Yes, because the culprit will never stay behind bars for this murder. You'll find out later what I mean. This is the case of Traci Lynn Hammerberg. As always, let me introduce you to this young and vibrant girl named Traci. On March the 7th, 1966, Judy Claband and Harold Hammerberg welcomed Traci into the world. She was born in Milwaukee, in the state of Wisconsin. From what I was able to gather, her parents divorced at a certain moment, so in the late 1970s, the family relocated to Saukville, in the state of Wisconsin, not too far from Milwaukee, roughly half an hour. Our story will unfold in the mid-1980s, definitely a different era compared to nowadays. Society has changed a lot in 40 years. The 1980s was an era where music came from cassette tapes and radios. TV had limited channels, and personal computers were just emerging, in their infancy stages. Fashion and culture in the 1980s were bold and expressive. As far as social interaction, people once gathered in person or called on landlines, while now it mostly happens on social media. Did you like the 1980s? I want to know your opinion down in the comment section. Well, Traci was a high schooler at Port Washington High School. However, it's unknown whether she made it to get her graduation diploma. I wasn't able to find information regarding her high school, like if she had many friends or if she did well in school. I forgot to mention she had a sister named Lori. Honestly, I don't know you guys, but I would like to have a better understanding at who Traci really was, like her passions or hobbies, what she wanted to do after school, maybe just hanging out with friends or going to the mall, just teenage stuff, but information regarding her whereabouts are limited. As said earlier, Traci lived her teenage years in Saukville, a small village in Ozaukee County, about 23 miles north of Milwaukee and just a few miles from Lake Michigan. The village was incorporated in 1915, and according to the 2020 census, it had a population of 4,000 people. Many local community events take place, like summer concerts, live at the Triangle, a 4th of July parade and fireworks, and a farmers market between June and October. Despite its dimension and population, it seems like a lively community, where peace and quiet run aplenty, where everybody knows everybody. So was it back in the 1980s? Back to Traci's case. One cold winter night, the course of her life would forever change. Unfortunately, something wouldn't go in the right direction. It should have been just a night out spent with friends, smoking and having some fun, but it turned out to be a nightmare. December the 14th, 1984. It was a Friday afternoon, just a couple weeks shy of Christmas Day, but little did she know she wouldn't make it to celebrate it. That day, Traci was babysitting at another house in Saukville, where she had been living for a while. She had plans on hanging out that night in Grafton with her friends, as said previously, so she met them down at the grocery store. Then, they headed to a Port Washington bar named Quad's Tavern, That's a precious detail because she had told a bartender they were heading to a party in Grafton, almost 4 miles from Saukville. They all seemed to enjoy their stay at the party, having smoked some Maria guys, I can't tell the exact name of course, and drank a bit. Afterwards, she decided it was time to go home at roughly 12:30 a.m. on December the 15th. So she left alone on foot. She started her 4 mile walk along Highway 33. Nevertheless, she was used to walking from Port Washington to Saukville on foot, so she thought that would be just a normal walk, just nothing scary at all. Unfortunately, she wouldn't make it home because she was murdered and sexually assaulted. After a few hours had gone by, Traci Hammerberg was found by a hunter at 5:35 a.m. on December the 15th, 1984, carrying no identification. A call to the police was made. Her body was discarded on a snowy driveway on Maple Road in Grafton. She was positively identified by her family. It was Traci. That's what Sheriff James Johnson with the Ozaukee County Sheriff's Office said in a press conference back in October 2019. Quote, autopsy revealed that Traci had been sexually assaulted and strangled. She had been repeatedly struck on the right side of her head with a metallic object. She was brutally beaten. Unquote. I'm at a loss of words. It's just cruel and heinous what this young girl had been through. A nightmare for sure. She didn't deserve it. Who was capable of committing such a brutal murder? Was Traci targeted? Did she know her killer? Or was she just a random person? Maybe in the wrong place at the wrong time. Did she call for help? Did anyone hear her? These are some of the questions that may have haunted Traci's family. As far as the investigation into her brutal murder, no suspects were immediately identified in Traci's murder. No clues whatsoever. No leads to follow. Upon arrival at the scene, police officers couldn't figure out if the victim had been murdered at the scene or been brought there later. As far as findings at the murder scene, Marlboro cigarettes were found close to the body, and this was a brand Traci wouldn't use to smoke. There was a tip, however. Two witnesses had seen a car driving off quickly from the road in Grafton with no headlights, but it seems like that didn't yield any useful follow-up. The community was devastated, left with fear and many questions they couldn't address. A murderer was on the hunt, and no one was able to identify him. His DNA was collected, though. What's nerve-wracking about this story is that the following year, in 1985, Traci's friend, named Wendy Smith, was also murdered. The two murders were not connected to each other, though. A very heartbreaking coincidence. Yeah, spooky. I hope that these two girls are able to meet each other again, wherever they are now. How sad. When Traci's body was recovered, in the early hours of December the 15th, 1984, she was naked from waist down. As you know, guys, this is always a red flag, of course. It was unclear what the murder weapon was. For instance, some reports suggested it could be a metallic object. What remained of Traci was cremated, and the family was forced to move on. But the pain never went away, of course. Traci's always remained in their hearts. Unfortunately, this case seemed difficult to solve, having almost zero leads to follow, despite the fact investigators crossed out more than 400 men through DNA testing and blood type. Year after year, the hopes were vanishing. It all looked dead. But fortunately, technology has been developing, working in our favor, and finally one day, police were able to provide a name, the murderer, linked to this case. After 35 long years, the case was solved, thanks to a more advanced DNA analysis. This is what was disclosed during a press conference in October 2019 by Sheriff James Johnson with the Ozaukee County Sheriff's Office. All the efforts put by the police finally paid off. The suspect was identified as Philip Ross. He was 21 years old back in 1984 when the tragedy took place, plus he was living in Wisconsin. From what I was able to find, this man would work the graveyard shift at Rexnord Plastics in Grafton. Here's an extract of the press conference. What Johnson said, quote, "After almost 35 years, we found the person that had brutally raped, strangled, and bludgeoned Traci Hammerberg to death." Unquote. There's an issue. This man died of a drug overdose in August 2012, at the age of 39, almost 50. Sadly, we'll never know for sure what really happened that cold and fateful winter night in 1984. The person responsible will never disclose these crucial details because he's no longer alive. Nevertheless, he got away with this crime too. He will never get to stay behind bars for what he had done. Actually, he got in and out of jail over the years for other stuff though. Bottom line, authorities had formed a DNA profile of the perpetrator, using the elements they were able to collect, like the semen found in Tracy's body and DNA found underneath her fingernails. But like we explained beforehand, they were unable to identify him at the time. Sticking to what was disclosed in the press conference, the Osage County Sheriff's Office worked in partnership with Wisconsin's Department of Justice Division of Criminal Investigation and the FBI Behavioral Analysis Unit. The DNA profile, which had been created, was updated to a genetic genealogy database in order to identify members of the family of the perpetrator. Investigators were actually able to find a second cousin of the database. Afterwards, they had to create a long family tree, which went back 4 generations. What's worth noticing is that genealogy database have recently been used to solve very old cases, which otherwise would still be unsolved. In the family genealogy, the search was restricted to any male ranging in age between 16 and 60, back in 1984. They were almost done. The last step was to investigate the results they had found, locating and eliminating these suspects. In August 2019, finally a match was found. The medical examiner's office confirmed their intuition. Cross DNA was sent to a lab. As far as Philip goes, he would take the same bus as Tracy to get to school. I wondered whether the suspect and the victim knew each other, but I wasn't able to find any information on that. Was it a premeditated murder? Maybe Cross found Tracy on her way home and pulled by. He wanted to have sex and, at her refusal, he got very angry. I don't know, that's just a theory. Maybe he acted in a fit of rage. As said earlier, we'll never know for sure what happened that night. We are left with merely speculation. On top of that, he was known to have a bad temper, a violent and impulsive guy. People close to Philip Cross would describe him as an abusive and aggressive person, who would often have violent reactions when met with a refusal. In this regard, he got arrested for violent conduct many times over the years. Even his relationships were marked by abusive behaviors. A few years ago, in 2020, the Traci Hammerberg murder was featured on a television program series named Bloodline Detectives, being the second episode. It was narrated by the true crime celebrity Nancy Grace, a former prosecutor. In the episode, in which Sheriff Jim Johnson, former Under Sheriff Jeff Taylor, Detective Scott Heller, and former Detective Fred Mueller were interviewed, it was recounted the way the investigators were finally able to find the perpetrator. It was a method created by the FBI, being used to solve a major old case, that of the Golden State Killer, a former police officer who murdered at least 50 people in southern and northern California back in the 1970s and 80s. What impressed me is that Philip Cross, the suspect of this tragic case, was never on police radar, according to Jim Johnson. The same program with another narrator was featured in the United Kingdom. Well, that's the end of our video, guys. A very sad case. They finally got some kind of closure. Maybe not was as hoped at the beginning, but still, I hope the family could find closure. Let me know in the comment section what thoughts you have about this wild case. Mine is that there wasn't much police could do back in the days. The absence of technology made it way tougher to solve crimes like this. The 80s were very different from now. It was easier, if we can say so, to get away from crimes. That's my understanding. Thanks for joining this episode and see you in the next one. Until then, stay safe and aware.